She's worked intensively, that's a word I know, with law enforcement in international efforts to identify victims of war crimes and political murders. Y'all are going to get excited for this one, I know. Please welcome from North Carolina State University, Dr. Ann Ross.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for having me here today. One of the things I'm going to address today is the issue of our unidentified human remains crises. Nobody likes to talk about the deceased, but unfortunately, we have a mass disaster in our own country that is silent. We have approximately 4,400 UIDs that are recovered each year. 600,000 people go missing. However, these numbers are old and they're outdated about 20 years, so I'm sure it's a lot more than that now. In North Carolina, we have 138 unidentified decedents that we know of, and that means they don't have a name. There's no way to give them a name. I put down a National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, or NAMUS. It's our national system where law enforcement includes or updates, adds the missing individuals, and forensic pathologists include the unidentified people, and a shout out to RTI for working on this project. And all of these individuals that are in there are cross-matched or cross-checked with the missing and the unidentifieds. However, we have approximately 40 to 50,000 unidentified human remains in the United States. The NCIC records only about 8,000, so they're obviously under-reporting. And the National Crime Information Center only accounts for 2.4% of those individuals. Most of the individuals are foreign-born, meaning they're undocumented or also documented. We have a huge crisis on the US-Mexico border. We have unique challenges that the system that we use is based on the FBI for CODIS or DNA. However, that is tailored to American citizens. If you're not in CODIS, your chances of getting identified are pretty slim. The demographics are unidentified are predominantly male, foreign-born, adult, Black, Indigenous, people of color. We have individuals that are at risk, such as drug addiction, prostitution, substance abuse, the mentally ill, and the marginalized. So the individuals that we see that are unidentified were those that were marginalized in life and then become marginalized in death as well. Why do we have unidentifieds? Well, you have so many active cases. Even you turn on the news every day, all the mass shootings, other deaths, that those become cold very rapidly if you cannot solve that case. Law enforcement are understaffed. They're underfunded. There's also a lack of interagency communication, and as well as Dr. Rupera-Miller mentioned, that all areas of forensic sciences, including our medical examiners or coroners, were understaffed and underfunded and underpaid. So the normal time frame is believed that if a case is not solved within 72 hours, it is perceived as likely to ever being solved. Again, it's a lack of cooperation with agencies such as law enforcement, medical examiners, and also the United States, compared to other countries, is an entire continent, right? And all of our states and a lot of the individuals that we have here, they're very transitory in nature. So you may have been born in Florida, but you moved for a job to the West Coast, and we have a lot of transient individuals, especially, the Triangle as well. Another thing that we deal with a lot is also the media has a role to play in this. We actually have a missing white women syndrome. And a lot of the, as I'm sure you remember the Gabby Petito case, it was on the news 24/7. We don't individuals of color or BIPOC individuals do not get that same kind of coverage as these other individuals. So, why do we care, right? Why do we care about this? Because the right to a personal identity is a basic human right. It is recognized by various international declarations and conventions, including the United Nations, and we are well behind our European colleagues in actually trying to make these identifications and trying to put the money into returning individuals' personhood back. Again, they are the marginalized in life and then after death. They're individuals that are seen or deemed as social deviants by society. So for example, in Raleigh, we have 296 unauthorized migrants here now. Most of them are from Mexico, Central America, South America, Caribbean, Asian, India, and Africa. So how are we going to get an identification if we need a familiar DNA sample? How are we going to contact embassies? How are we going to even establish where the country or geographic origin of these individuals are? So in 2019, there's a law that started in North Carolina that all law enforcement has to enter deceased and missing if they have been missing for over 30 days. And this includes missing children and missing and unidentified people. So at least North Carolina, we have this law in place now, which is great. So one of the things that we have established here in North Carolina is the North Carolina Unidentified Project. And this is a multi-agency, multidisciplinary project that involves all agencies, because that's part of the communications that you need, which involves local law enforcement as well as state, such as the State Bureau of Investigation, Medical Examiner's Office, Forensic Anthropology, and if we can, and it's deemed appropriate, forensic genetic genealogy. So we have started including these, but again, there are only funds, state and federal funds, for unidentifieds if they're homicides. If you're a suicide or undetermined death, there is no funding, and the FDG is very costly, up in the words of $7,000 per case to get this done. Obstacles, African Americans are not well represented in these big popular databases, neither are Hispanics because of distrust of the system, issues of systemic racism. But we are making a tiny dent here in North Carolina. We have, this past year, we have identified 6 individuals. The unidentified date back to 1976. So we have cases in North Carolina that actually date back to the 1950s. So we're trying to kind of close all of those out as well. So thank you.
All right, Q&A time with Dr. Ross. We've got questions coming from our audience. One coming right here down the center aisle.
So if so many of these people are unidentified, how do we know that they're foreign-born if we don't know who they are?
That's a good question. We don't at first, right? So we, as a forensic anthropologist, my job, if the person is unrecognizable, we develop what we call a biological profile, or provide you with the demographics of what that person look like when they were alive. And so we can get some clues that way, and we have some software. For example, you can digitize the skull and it will tell you, let's say if the individual is likely South American, Southeastern European, and that kind of takes us down one route. And we also use heavy isotopes and light isotopes. You literally are what you eat, so it depends on those isotopic values. We can actually find out from your teeth where you grew up as a child, and from other bones such as a rib or something else where you spent the last few years of your life. So we put all of this together and kind of paint you a picture.
Fascinating stuff. All right, we've got a question back in the corner. I'm coming. I got little legs. Hold on. All right, all the way in the back, your question.
I'm very curious. Do you have any ideas about what it would take to get publicity for the marginalized, for the not pretty white people that make the news, they get all the publicity, get all the attention, and yet you have all these people, you know, who are ignored. And as an older white male, it concerns me that this stereotype continues. It continues on certain TV networks where you want to put on beauty queens, you know, to talk to old white men, older white men, and it's that same old stereotype. What can we do to break away or to improve this situation? Because so many of the people, like you said, are the marginalized. They're not pretty. They're not beauty queens. They're not white. What can we do as just average citizens? Does anybody have ideas about that?
That's a really good point, and I wish I had the answer for that question. I don't.
Okay, good times. All right, so we've got our final question coming right here.
Thank you for the talk, but can you speak to the cost that went into those 6 cases that you've cleared, and how does that affect, I mean, how does the cost affect this process?
It's highly prohibitive. So the reason why we triage those cases is to deem which cases would be the easiest to solve first. And then we work on some of the other cases, yeah. And those are working, these cold cases, in between your active cases, right? So again, it's a time issue as well.
All right, I think we actually do have time for one more question. I saw you're way too eager, sir. My God. All right, last question.
Sorry, and I know this isn't even like necessarily the area that you were speaking on, but I couldn't help but think of the rape kits that have been in the news in North Carolina. There being a great backlog of unprocessed rape kits. Are there correlations between kind of those, like the same bottlenecks facing that sort of pathway as there are to this?
I'm not sure if it's the same pathways, because those are usually submitted by law enforcement, and I think in general the DNA labs are backlogged. So we can't just send it to any old DNA lab. They have to be ASCLD accredited to do forensic work, and there are not that many in the United States, and I think that's part of it.
All right, folks, big hand for Dr. Ann Ross.